Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about forgiveness. On September 6, 2018, an off-duty police officer, Amber Geiger, shot and fatally killed a young man, Botham Jean, in his apartment, mistaking his for hers. The following year, Botham's brother, Brant, gave a statement in which he not only forgave Amber for shooting his brother, but he hugged her and he stated that he desired for her to get a relationship with God, and he told her that God would forgive her if she asked. When he forgave her, many stated they didn't know this level of forgiveness existed. I myself thought about Brant's relationship with Christ for him to not only forgive but also to hug the woman. I was intrigued by how selflessly he showed the love of Christ. I recently saw the movie Till, which depicts the life of how 14-year-old Emmett Till, a black boy, was brutally beaten and shot in 1955 in Mississippi after others found out about an encounter he had with a white woman. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, mustered the strength to have an open casket funeral, and she further championed the rights of African Americans after the death of her son. A mother lost her only son, to a senseless act of violence, and her son's killers walked free for the rest of their lives. Emmett's murderers escaped the legal justice system. How can Mamie forgive when it's as if her son was murdered twice? First, he was killed and dumped in a river. Second, his murderers were acquitted. But we have seen this deep level of forgiveness before. Maybe we simply couldn't pinpoint it recently. On the cross, Jesus told Heavenly Father to forgive us for sentencing him, an innocent man, to death. Before he got on the cross, even Pilate, the one who could pardon him, said that Christ was innocent and didn't deserve to die. For my eternal peace and yours, I'm thankful people were ready to kill Jesus themselves. Forgiveness is a topic that requires involvement from people. It requires maturity and a willingness to at times compromise. One of the reasons why forgiveness is hard for people is because we focus on our past, our bad memories, and not our future. We continue to rehearse the wrongdoing in our mind, amplifying the hurt and pain we experience. True forgiveness is a spiritual process. It can be coupled with therapy and other natural solutions, but only our Heavenly Father can work on one's heart to remove pain and replace it with peace and rest and at times love. The problem is, we mistake the absence of a desire for malicious intent or ill will as forgiveness. However, that is not true forgiveness. Forgiveness is when you have peace and rest from the wrongful action and the person who harmed you. If you are still emotionally triggered, then you haven't finished the process of forgiveness. If every time you see a red car because you're raped in a red car, you have a physical reaction or a flashback, you haven't forgiven the person. If every time you see the individual who stole money from you and ran up your credit, you haven't forgiven the person if you have a reaction to that. We intellectually tell ourselves that we have forgiven someone because we no longer want to harm the person, but we haven't truly forgiven that individual. The process of forgiveness is individualistic, so the time varies from person to person. It can be a long process or a short process. The word forgive is first mentioned in Genesis chapter 50, verse 17. This is an account of siblings asking for forgiveness for how they wronged their brother. Joseph's brothers asked him for forgiveness, saying that it was their father's desire before he died, and they were willing to be Joseph's servants. The first time the word forgiveness is mentioned in the Bible is about a family issue, one of the closest relational bonds on earth. This is important. Now, the topic of forgiveness itself is mentioned earlier in Genesis when Cain had a conversation with God about being marked for death over him murdering his brother Abel. He didn't outright ask God for forgiveness, but as we learn later about what forgiveness actually truly means, he did receive it from God. The process of forgiveness is laid out for us in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Excuse me, chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Let's break down the word itself. In the Strong's Concordance, it is H5375 and it's pronounced Nasa, which means to bear or carry. The prefix for typically means opposite or loss, but it can also mean completion. In this word, the meaning is completion. Next, give meaning an action as required on your part to release something. The suffix ness means the state or condition of something. So at surface level, forgiveness is to carry something and to be in a state of giving or releasing what you are carrying. Now, how do we release and how do we do that process? And what does it do for us? The end of Matthew 11 tells us, verse 28 says that if we are laboring and burdened down, Jesus will give us rest. In verse 29, Jesus says that we take his yoke, a biblical term that means burden. And as we take his burden, he will give us rest in our souls. Well, what is your soul? Your mind, your will, and your emotions. So Jesus tells us to take his burden because he says it's easy and light in verse 30. Jesus is saying that if we take his burden upon us by giving and releasing the pain and trauma we have, he in turn will give us rest from the labor and toil we have in our mind, the labor and toil we have in our will to take revenge or will to get even, and the labor and toil we have in our emotions. As you put the burden on Christ, he steps in between you and that person and that trauma. And it makes it hard to see that person and that trauma because Christ is actually covering that. Let's look at a physical example. If I put a harness on an untrained animal, the animal will yank or toil against the harness. But when I train the animal, it will learn to work with the harness. So there's an ease, a peace within the animal. Let's dive deeper into how we can live out forgiveness. Forgive means to face the wrong, open your heart to heal, reevaluate the story you've attached to the hurt, gain a new perspective, investigate what actions needed to move forward, value who you are intrinsically, and engage in helpful conversations, helpful inner conversations. So let's look at a personal example from my life. When I was in middle school, I was actually bullied, and something that I could uh, easily tell myself as someone who is, not currently married and desires marriage, I could easily look at my past and say I'm not worthy to be loved, that no one would be attentive to me, and I can go down a really deep rabbit hole of being in a self-defeatist mindset. However, there is a different perspective I've chosen. The individual who bullied me felt insecure about herself and therefore needed someone to be an external point of contact for her insecurity. This person could only feel better about herself by making me feel bad about myself and putting me down. So this story I've told myself has actually led me to feel compassion for this person who clearly had low self-esteem. I've also realized that I didn't have the communication skills in middle school that I now have as an adult. To move forward in life, I've forgiven that person and I intrinsically understand my value. And when self-defeatist thoughts come to my mind, I squander them by saying the opposite, what I truly want for my life. I recently heard that forgiveness is a process and some of us go through it faster than others. The time it takes to forgive someone is solely up to the person releasing forgiveness. We just need to remember that forgiveness is essential. Harboring unforgiveness can not only lead to bitterness, it can also lead to physical ailments. As you go throughout the rest of your week, think back to anyone you may need to forgive, release from the wrong that they've done to you so that you can then bring inner peace into your life. You can read this video, the text form of it on my website at sherebalances.com. And if this information has been helpful, please comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.